Hey guys, it's Filter SC here, and I'm back for my Terran episode for Heart of the Swarm number 15. This particular episode is going to focus almost purely on preparing your attack and preparing your harass to make sure not only is your harass as successful as it possibly can be, but your back end is taken care of as well, so that when you do go for that drop, you do get the damage done, or you go for that big attack, you get a lot of damage done. You're ready on your own back end to take advantage of that, right? You're not sitting in a situation where you've done quite a bit of damage to your opponent, but you've also done a lot of damage to yourself because you're banking 2,000 or 3,000 minerals, 1,000 gas, your upgrades never started because you've got your armory. That kind of stuff is really important to make sure you get all that taken care of before you finish your attack or even start your attack. So we're going to talk a lot about this in this particular video, and this is going to be one of the most important ones for really showing you how to finish games. Make sure you can take full advantage of almost every situation you put yourself in when you're trying to be an aggressive player. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to mention is very recently Gretorps did a video that is talking all about your attack rotation and your defensive macro rotations and how to kind of get the most out of your army when you're going over macro and micro and stuff like that. I'm going to link the video in the description. I strongly recommend you go check it out. For those of you that aren't aware, Gretorps is Grandmaster Random player, plays all races at a very high level, and he also casts for an ASL currently. Gretorps is an excellent player, and the video content he puts out is absolutely top-notch, so I strongly recommend you take that video up, you go look at it. I don't need to go over everything because it's a very similar feeling that I was going to put out with my video. However, there's a few things I really want to talk about that are going to help you out. If you combine the two videos, you're going to get the most out of it. So I strongly recommend you check out his video. You can either check it out after or before we go through this video. But I'll put the link in the description. Go check it out. It's a really, really useful video. I quite enjoyed it myself. Alright, so what I want to talk about really quickly here is what's called no micro versus over micro. These are both very, very bad in their own kind of sense, and they're both very symptomatic of players that are playing at anything below basically a GM or a really high master level. Quite often players in our situation either consider ourselves macro players or we consider ourselves like all-in cheesy players, right? There's no in between, and what separates a player from being a very good player and being a great player is the ability to essentially do both at the same time. And there's a few different tricks and kind of ways you can keep up with that. But just for a little bit more detail, when we talk about no micro, what I mean by that is you load your drop and you send it off to go do its thing. You drop it off, you stim it, you run it in, and that's it. Like, you don't touch it, the drop dies, the medevac dies. The threat of the drop is gone. Maybe you did damage, maybe you don't. You don't even really know if you did damage because you weren't watching it. So you can't really base any decisions later on in the game off that. But on the bright side, you took care of your business back at home and you're relying on your macro play, right? Same thing when you do like multi-prong attacks. A lot of people just send the drop in, the drop dies. It never gets out, never creates more threat. It's never continually pulling your opponent apart. But when you watch really high level games, that drop never dies. That drop does a lot of damage and the drop gets out and the player is aware of what damage the drop did, right? Now the second problem we have is what's called over micro. Now, what over micro is when you send the drop in and you do nothing else and you end up floating 2,000 or 3,000 minerals. You don't position your main army to take advantage of something at the front. So a good example of that is if your opponent pulls everything back to defend against your drop, you micro the drop a little bit, you pull it out, but your army's not in position to take advantage of his third base that's completely exposed because he pulled his full army all the way to the back. So it's really important that we're not using either no micro or over micro, and we make sure we set ourselves up so we can really hit on the balance between the two, so that we can macro behind our attack, we can position our main army where it needs to be, and we can control that drop properly. And it's actually very simple to do, but you have to kind of be aware of your own limitations as a player when you go to do those things. Obviously somebody like Flash is able to do a lot more at once, but at the same time when you watch his play, you'll see a lot of his drop based play is set up on the fact that his back end is already taken care of and he can focus on the drop. Alright, so first we're going to talk about Harass and what we kind of need to make sure we have set up already in our base along with our build when we go to do really early Harass as well as kind of mid to late game Harass. Now the first thing about this is you have to understand if your Harass is going to be combined with a potential attack or if it's just Harass to keep your opponent in his base so that he doesn't attack you because you really don't have a lot at home. This is way more common in TBT than basically any other matchup. Because in TBT it's almost all about the harass. It's kind of funny because a lot of other races complain about Terran drops and Hellbats and all that stuff. Some of it's justified, some of it's not. But at the same time, it's not like Terran players get a free pass. Whenever you play a TBT, the higher up you go in terms of skill level, the more stuff gets lost, right? It's not uncommon to see a really high level TBT where both players are losing 30 to 40 SCVs, they're losing bases, everything is getting killed all over the place, right? So it's really important that we have our checklist set up so that when we go to harass, our back end is properly taken care of, we don't have to worry about it. We can do damage with our drop and we can save those units because those units are very, very important, especially in early game TBT, but they're important in any situation, right? If you're facing a Zerg, for instance, they don't have any way really to kill off your drop until they get mutas. So if you're dropping them and picking up, you're going to make it quite a pain for them. In terms of Protoss, they don't have any way to take your drop out of the air. It's very rare for Protoss to go for, Phoenix or something like that to deny drops. So if you can keep your drop alive against a Protoss player, you're going to force his stalkers basically to be in the back of his base and lots of cannons and all sorts of stuff to go up. So it's really important that when you do go to do your drop play, you have what's called a build checklist ready to go. Now, what is this build checklist? Well, the first thing is, when you go out for your drop, let's say it's a pre-planned drop, you basically rushed up to starport, you're just dropping like 8 Marines, right? You're going to drop 8 Marines in the back of his base, you're going to hope to kill maybe a couple of workers, maybe a supply depot, but you want to keep your opponent pinned to his base. So you're not going to have, any kind of main attack or anything like that moving out, right? So when you go to do this, when you set up your drop, make sure you fly it around the corners of the map and fly it to the edge of their base before it drops. You don't want to have to control the drop before you're ready. And as your drop's kind of getting to their base, you want to make sure you have your extra barracks that you're trying to build in the background. You want to make sure your upgrades are all started. You want to make sure that your gas is all ready to go. And you just go through your base. You check to make sure you have, do I have enough production facilities? Do I have enough supply depots? Am I starting my upgrades? Is all my gas taken that needs to be? Is everything ready to go? And even if you're delaying that drop by 10 or 15 seconds while you go ahead and throw down all those barracks, while you go ahead and put extra guys in gas, you're going to be a lot more effective, right? So you get all your production and everything that you want. Maybe you even start a third base, whatever it is behind your drop that you're trying to accomplish, make sure you get that started before you go in for the drop. And then as all those buildings are going up, for instance, if you're building like 3 or 4 extra barracks and you're going to put reactors all on that, you have about 2 minutes that you can play around with your drop and not really set yourself behind because you're not building anything else, right? The only thing you really need to do is worry about supply depots in that situation. So just go through, make sure that everything is ready to go before you go in for your drop. And then drop it off, micro that bad boy, make sure you don't lose it, kill SCVs, kill things that are opportunistic to kill, like reactors, tech labs, maybe you can even kill the starport, but supply depots and stuff like that are all really good. Don't try to kill your opponent with a drop, just try to do as much damage as you possibly can that is guaranteed. Right? Like, you're probably not going to kill a barracks, and even if you do, it's not great damage. You could kill 2 or 3 supply depots in that time. And if he comes to shut you down, maybe you don't kill the 3rd depot, but you've already killed 2. Whereas if you're trying to kill a barracks, he would just repair the barracks and basically have taken no damage, right? So it's really, really important that when you go out for your drop, you get everything set up back at home before you send your drop in. Even if your drop's just floating outside of its base, it's not really a big deal. You want to make sure, obviously, it's not underneath an overlord and that kind of stuff. But then you can go and control the drop, make sure you get the most out of it. More importantly, save those units and even keep them hanging around to go back in for another drop when you have another opening in your build order where there's really not a lot going on. So it's really, really important to make sure that you have a checklist for your build that you're running through, right? So for example, for me, when I'm playing TBT and I'm going for bio, when my drop's flying out, I want to make sure, typically I'll have stim already finished, or very, very close, so that when my drop lands, my stim's done and I can stim and do a lot of damage. But on my back end, I'm making sure I'm going up to about 5 barracks. I'm either deciding to take a third or delaying it, starting my +1/+1 upgrades, and I'm making sure all that is happening before my drop goes in, even if my drop gets delayed by a little bit. It's more important that I don't do any damage to myself, and that I have the opportunity to control my drop for maximum damage on my opponent. Really, really important trick. And you'll see it start to pay off in your own gameplay. Before you drop, just think, okay, do I have everything ready? Am I going to start banking money? Do I have all my barracks ready to go? Is everything set up before I go in for my drop or my harassment? Now, the second type of checklist you want to have is when you're going for really, really aggressive attacks, right? So what you want to be doing is pretty much the first thing you do is you move your army out onto the map. So hopefully you already have map control so you can be kind of aggressive. And as your army is moving across the map, that's when you do things like, am I going to take a third? If if I'm taking a third behind this attack, let's go ahead and drop that third base, make sure it's going up. Make sure we're checking the minimap so that any drops coming into us, we're going to be okay, so we can worry about routing our reinforcements forward. Do we have all the barracks up we need? Is our armory going up so we can start our next set of upgrades? Is our starport active, getting more medevacs up that we're going to need? Is everything ready to go? So the one I attack, I'm going to be in good shape behind the attack to have, a good force in case my attack fails or gets caught out or something bad happens. And then when I'm doing my attack, I can make the best decisions of how I should attack and how I should control my army. A lot of micro is just having, everything in place behind it so that you can control your units, because a lot of people can control them properly, but then a lot of people end up with, that 2,000 or 3,000 mineral bank, which is what we're trying to avoid, right? So you want to make sure you're getting everything in place before your attack, and you're hitting on like an upgrade and doing some sort of timing so that hopefully your attack's as effective as possible. And then you have your full checklist behind it. So you go, okay, I'm going up to 9 barracks, I've got my third base behind it, I've got everything hotkeyed properly, I'm fully ready to engage this army. This attack is going to go really well. My army's already spread out, so those banelings or zerglings or whatever it is that's coming at me is not going to do too much damage. Now, the second part about that is after you've made sure that you already have all your back end and all that kind of stuff sorted out, you want to check your opponent's army location and what type of composition he has, and then be effective in how you attack him. So let's say your opponent's going for kind of an aggressive third while you're taking your third behind the attack. You scan your opponent and you see a lot of sieged up siege tanks. That is natural, and you're playing mostly bio. So when you see that, you don't go, well, I'm hitting this timing and I'm going to attack him anyway. You go, okay, well, based on the fact that he's well defended as natural, his third is probably very exposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a small group of units and I'm going to set up a drop into his main, and you just load up, fly the drop over, and then you go down to attack his third and hopefully deny that. And then you don't get greedy. You don't go for the kill after you've already killed his third, because you've created a big advantage for yourself because your own third is being built behind this, right? So what you do is you just attack your opponent's third, you deny the third, make sure that everything is ready to go on your own end, and then you pull back, regroup your army, give your medevacs a chance to heal it all up. You put your opponent in a bad spot because he knows you're taking a third. He has to attack, or he has to do something because he can't sit in his base. That's not going to work for him. And then maybe the small drop that you sent to his main, as you have attacked the third and pulled back, that drop is kind of landing or already there. So his whole army is maybe coming down to greet you, and then your drop has a huge opportunity to do damage in the back of his base. It's important though when you decide to kind of split off part of your army to do a secondary attack, maybe against a Zerg player you're attacking a fourth and a third, that number one, your army's going to beat his army if he comes to you, and number two, he doesn't have a ton of static defense set up that's going to shut down your drop, right? So if you're dropping a Terran player and he already has like 500 turrets set up, there's really no point in going for that drop. You may as well just keep your units with your army because that drop's never going to land, right? And it's really important that you have your back end set up and you know what the purpose of your attack is when you go to attack. Am I trying to attack him to take my third and deny his? I noticed, maybe you look at your opponent and you go, okay, his army's actually out of position, his tanks aren't sieged up, I can kill him right now. And you go in and you try to kill your opponent. And it's important that you're still trying to take that third base behind it, even though you're trying to kill your opponent. You're taking care of, your extra barracks and all that stuff, so that if he eventually does clean up your army, you're already going to have a big army back at home. You're going to be able to come back in a couple of minutes and just finish the job when your next set of upgrades finishes up. It's really important that you have that checklist though when you go for either harassment or attacks. If you're not doing that, you're going to find the games a lot more difficult. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular episode of Bronze to Masters. I really hope you take as much out of this as you possibly can and understand the importance of making sure you set up your back end so that you can micro and control your army properly and make the correct decisions in battle without having to pull back and do stuff in the background and lose your army because you're not watching the fight, or you're ending up with a big bank. Both of those are very negative. You want to take care of those even if it delays your drop, your harass, or your attack by a few seconds, because it's more important to do that before the attack than it is to do it after. Very simple and straightforward. Hopefully you guys go check out that video by Gretorps, because it's a very good way to make sure you're managing your attacks properly and getting the most out of them. And you can find me streaming on twitch.tv/filtersc. You can find me on Twitter @filterstarcraft. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, leave comments and feedback in the comment section on YouTube, and I will see you guys next time.